Guest today is former Indianapolis Indian and former Major League infielder Gary Green, also the son of a former Major League pitcher, Fred Green. We'll be back with Gary after these words. Former Indianapolis Indian and former Major League infielder Gary Green is our guest. Gary has worked in the game for many years in his post-playing days, and he's with the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Indians' top team, AAA team. Gary, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Howard. It's always good to see you. It's been a couple of years since I've had a chance to sit down with you.
Yeah, this is really nice. It's great spending time with you. Before we get to your career and your post-playing days, let's go back to when you were young. Your dad was a Major League Baseball player. He was a pitcher. So tell us about growing up, even though I'm not sure exactly when your dad retired. I know you were born in 1963, but tell us about growing up the son of a ball player.
Well, the good thing, he introduced me to the game, obviously, when I was young, and then just allowed it to grow from there. I know we talked the other day off air about a number of former players in the game who were pitchers, had sons that have played, and they went on to be position players, which I think we were talking about Neil Walker the other day, Howard, and that was the case for myself as well. He always wanted me to be a position player to where I could play every day. And actually, it really worked out better for me. I enjoy much better trying to prepare to play every day as opposed to once every 4 or 5 days a week.
Let's talk about your dad for a moment. He had a very good year in 1960, won 8 games for the world champion Pirates.
He did. He was fortunate to be a part of that team. And as you know, it had a number of really good players on that team, to include a couple Hall of Famers in Clemente and Mazeroski. So really a great experience for him. And then I was fortunate to be around those guys as a young kid. So it was a great experience for myself as well.
Did he have positive things to say about the year? He had the great regular season. He didn't fare well in the World Series, even though the Pirates won. So was there a bitter taste about that, or was it strictly positive because they won?
It was positive. He didn't really talk a whole lot about it. My mom talked more about it than he did. I think, again, I don't know if many of the Pirate pitchers had much success that series. I'm surprised they were able to win that World Series, Howard. As you know, that the games that they lost were obviously lopsided games, and the games they were won were very close. So there wasn't many guys that had a lot of success from the pitching staff that year.
Well, the Pirates were outscored by the Yankees 55-27, yet the Pirates on Bill Mazeroski's home run won the World Series. It was simply incredible, and I know you grew up in Pittsburgh, and you must have heard a lot of talk about it too.
I did growing up. Again, not from my dad. He didn't talk much about it, but growing up in the area, and my mom talked about it a little bit, and then a lot of people in Pittsburgh had talked a lot about that year. So very special, and I'm certainly, he was proud to be a part of that group.
As we mentioned, you played for the Indianapolis Indians in 1993. You got time in the major leagues with the Padres, the Rangers, and the Reds. What are your thoughts when you look back to your playing career?
Just the relationships and the people that you were able to be around, whether it be players, instructors, coaches, was really an interesting time, and really I think it was a good time for me to play in the game, as I've seen all the changes over the last number of years in the game. I was really fortunate to play when I did. So and really take a lot of those things that you learn from a lot of those really good players that you were around and or instructors that you were around, and be able to try and help our young players today with.
Tell us about the impact Larry Bowa had on your career.
Well, it was really a big impact. Obviously playing the same position, and Larry played that position for a long time in the major leagues, and then to have him as a manager early in my career was really helpful to me as I moved through baseball. Just Not so much he helped me with the ability to play the position, but the focus, the importance of playing every pitch, every out, every day. So mentally, he helped me out more than anything.
You know, you hit upon a big key there when you talked about every pitch, every day, and a short, everybody should do that. But for a shortstop, I mean, it means everything to not lose focus. And I know that's something as an infield coordinator you would stress.
Well, that's right, Howard, and I certainly learned that from I learned it from playing, but Larry really stressed it every day when I was around him for that year in 1986, the importance of it, regardless of the score, being able to show up every pitch every day. And really, I think the biggest thing that I took away from that was he had mentioned that I should be exhausted mentally every time the game was over, and sit in the locker for 10 minutes just to wipe my brow before getting in the shower. And when I learned how to focus and concentrate like that, he was right. It made you more tired mentally than physically, but it was a big help in my career.
And then in your post-playing days, you have done a number of things. You were a manager, infield coordinator, a coach this year at AA Altoona. What are your thoughts when you look at your post-playing day career?
Well, it's just being able to give back to the players that are in the game today, and all the lessons that I had learned as a player going through this years ago. So it's just giving back to the young kids today that are trying to do the same thing that I was fortunate to do years ago.
That's so important. And do you find most of them are willing listeners and glad to get your help?
That's a good question, Howard. I think especially the younger players are. We had a young group in AA this year. It was very talented, and they really took the instruction well. I think they really learned how to focus and concentrate as we move through the season. I think where it gets a little tougher is when you get to the AAA level and you have guys coming in from other organizations, as you well know, guys that have been to the major leagues and are back in AAA. They're mad, they're frustrated. It's sometimes harder to get through to those guys as opposed to the younger players.
Yes. And, you know, and also when guys have been around, some bitterness sometimes seeks in, and they tend to spend more energy worrying about getting back to the big leagues than doing what they should do, which will get them back to the big leagues.
No, that's a great point. They spend more time trying to take care of C and not taking care of A and saying, just take care of one pitch at a time, one night at a time, because it's like in the major leagues, and their focus is always trying to get back and not taking care of what they need to take care of in front of them every day, like you're talking about.
1993, you played for the Indianapolis Indians. The Indians didn't have a winning season that year. What are your thoughts when you look back to that?
I think that, you know, you learn from both winning and losing. I think the biggest thing for me was I got hurt that year and missed a lot of that year. So that was something that caused me to miss the following year, which was in 1984. But again, it's really about the relationships, the people you're around, the staffs that you're around, and always trying to learn from everybody that you're around, Howard, because everybody has unique experiences in this game.
You hit upon a big comment there, learning. That should be, everybody should learn, live, and grow. And this game of baseball is so difficult to play that if you have the attitude, you want to learn, live, and grow, you can achieve so much. And one guy I can think of now who played here, whom you know, although you may not have directly coached, is Jacob Stallings. What he has achieved with the Pirates, and he hasn't done it at a very young age, but we were around him in Indianapolis, and we saw his desire to be really good and to get better.
Agreed. You could just see the maturation process with Jake system and how he would grow every year. There would be times where he'd be frustrated with his offensive output, but he stayed with it. He stayed with it. He kept learning. He kept learning about himself. He kept learning about the game, and he never gave up. And look what he's done in the big leagues the last 2 or 3 years. He's had a heck of a career the last number of years.
He may very well win a Gold Glove this year. We'll have more with Gary Green after these messages. shortstop, former Indianapolis Indian Gary Green is our guest. Gary, for many years, you were the Pirates infield coordinator. Please give us a rundown. You'd see these kids come out of high school, come out of college. What are some of the things you tried to teach young players? And that could be applicable for young players listening and watching now.
Once the players get into the organization, is basically just watch them and see what they're capable of doing, as opposed to jumping right into instruction with them. Because a lot of times, you start saying things to kids and they already have it figured. They're already past that. So Brian Hayes was one of those kids where you just watched him play. Even at 18 years old, you could see he was certainly ahead of things at 18 years old. So you learn from guys like that. I think, like I said, Howard, the biggest thing is just watch, see what guys bring to the table, see where they need help. And the only way you learn that is by sitting back and watching them for a while to see what they actually need.
That's a good point. Now, kid, Brian Hayes is really special defensively. His dad, Charlie, a big league third baseman for many years. One of the things, and I don't know if Brian ever told you this, but one of the things he told me, and I've shared with others, I think is a great thing, and I think you'll appreciate. I said, Brian, when he played in Indianapolis 2 years ago, I said, any reason why you're such a terrific fielder? And he said, yes, because when I was young, my dad used to say to me, your defense is just as important as your offense, so work at it. And he continually did.
Howard, that's what a great piece of advice from Charlie. But again, Charlie knows because he grew up around the game, spent a lot of times at the major league level. And in today's game, Howard, it's more about offense, as you know. Kids don't want to put the time in defensively because it's all about the bat today. And that's where I think the game is lacking is defensively, with the mistakes that are made, as well as on the bases at times as well. But it's just all about swinging the bat today. That's why Key Bryant is ahead of the curve, not only defensively, but on the bases. He's a good base runner. He's a complete player. He is a really fun guy to watch play. There's no question about it.
Well, you hit upon a good point. You mentioned about the bat, and the kids grow up these days, they take hitting lessons, they take pitching lessons, but they aren't out there playing games all day like you may have, and playing the game and learning to run the bases and playing the field and learning to focus. And that's not necessarily a good thing. It's important to work on your hitting, yes, but it's great to play games too and work on other things.
No, I agree with you, Howard. It's just such a controlled environment today where everything is structured for these young players today, with these camps that they go to. And it's just swing as hard as you can, throw it as hard as you can. They only play 4 or 5 innings at a time. Guys only get a couple of at-bats at a time. So you really never get to play 8 or 9 innings every day. And really, there's no substitute, as you mentioned, Howard, as opposed to playing the game. You learn by playing the game and have situations come up over and over again, and you learn how to navigate those situations. But when you only play 3 or 4 or 5 innings a day, and you only get a couple of at-bats a day, those situations don't come up often enough.
Tell us about this year. You were with Miguel Perez at AA Altoona. Miguel was the manager. You were a coach for him.
It was a great experience. I was his bench coach this year, and being around him was a lot of fun. The way he handled the players, and we certainly had a really talented group there in Altoona, especially position player wise. A number of those players you saw at the end of the year in Indianapolis, the last week or 10 days of the season, they were a lot of fun to be around. They wanted to win. They competed hard every day. It was really a great experience to just be with one group throughout the course of the season.
And O'Neill Cruz hit 5 home runs in 6 games with the Indianapolis Indians, got called to Pittsburgh for the final 2 games of the season, and had 2 hits the first day and a home run the next day. Tell us about him.
Well, not surprising. I've had a chance to see him since we brought him into the organization a few years back when he came over from the Dodgers organization. And you could certainly see the physical talent. There's nothing he cannot physically do on the baseball field. But what I saw out of him this year, which I hadn't seen in the past, was how he's tightened up his game. His at-bats were much tighter in terms of being more selective at the plate, not chasing as many bad pitches. Defensively, the focus and concentration was better. The ability to play every pitch, the ability to see the signs from the catchers, to be able to move and anticipate. So a lot of growth in O'Neill's game this year. It was really fun to see him compete and play the game with the physical and mental effort that it takes to be a great player, and he has a chance to be that.
He certainly does. And you've had some other good players too at the AA level with Altoona this year.
Oh man, there was a number of them. You know, Mason Martin, the first baseman, has a chance to be a very good player. I think you saw Rodolfo Castro, who had been in the big leagues this year, coming out of AA with us, and then you saw him the last week or 10 days. He's got a chance to be a really good player as well. You also saw a couple of the outfielders that came to you. Cal Mitchell has a chance to be a very good player. Kanan and Jigma Smith has a chance to be a very good player. So position player wise, you guys should have a really good team there next year, albeit they'll be young, but they're going to be fun. They're going to compete and they're going to get after it. They were a really fun group to be around this year.
Miguel Perez briefly played for the Indians, also was a coach here. Tell us about him as a manager.
Well, Miggy's really impressive. From the simple standpoint, he's a baseball guy. He understands the game. He understands what players go through. He understands how hard the game is. He treats everybody with respect. He listens. So when he says something to players, they listen because he doesn't have a lot to say unless it needs to be said. Out and play the game and have fun. He corrects the mistakes that are being made. He gives everybody a voice to speak their mind. And I think the biggest thing, the biggest strength of Miggy is the ability to have the patience to deal with young players and the mistakes that are going to happen. So really impressive being around him this year.
You hit upon a key there. You talk about playing the game. The game is so difficult to play because the skills, excuse me, of hitting and pitching are very, very challenging and they're difficult. And so because of that, the player who wants to learn and has the guidance from someone like yourself, from Miguel Perez, can do so much better than the player who just shows up.
Well, I agree. I think you have to allow players freedom to make mistakes, Howard, as long as the biggest thing that Miggy asked of those players this year was just, give us the effort. Give us the effort on the field. We'll live with the results and we'll work through the results, but just give us the effort on the field, go out and have fun, and we'll work through the trying times together. And those kids were really a lot of fun this year, led by Miggy for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned a while ago about playing the game as opposed to just hitting. Now, one of the ways the game's changed is that you take a shortstop, and a guy like Mark Belanger, terrific fielder, never hit, but he always had a job because he was a terrific fielder. Mm-hmm. Now it seems as if more is asked offensively of every player out there.
It seems like that is the case. They want more out of each position, no doubt about it. That's where the game has changed as opposed to before. I think that the emphasis in the past was always about pitching and defense, as you know, and you would find a way to score 2 or 3 runs and win a ball game. It's changed today. It's more about swinging the bat, hitting the ball out of the ballpark. But still, I mean, we defense in Altoona this year. You have to make plays for those pitchers when they get the ball on the ground for you, or when the ball's in the air. You got to make plays for them. You have to be ready to make plays for them to make the innings easier for them so they can go deeper in the game. So it's all about teaching these players how to play the game, Howard, as you well know. And I think Miggy did a really good job at that this year. And he kept it simple, but we made the simple things the important things, Howard.
I think you can't measure. It's such an intangible how much a good catcher means, how much a good shortstop means, because they're so involved in almost everything.
No doubt about it. It's important, as you well know, to be strong through the middle of the field. Catcher, pitcher, your two middle infielders, and your center fielder. And if you're strong through the middle of the field, you always have a chance. You have a chance to stay in every game.
Who was your favorite ball player growing up?
It was Roberto Clemente, growing up in Pittsburgh, and my dad, fortunate enough to play with him for a little while, and then having a chance to meet him when I was a young kid. He was always my favorite player growing up. Once I got into high school, it changed because then I became an infielder, and then it became Dave Concepcion.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Davey, because I feel he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Gary, it's great spending time with you. Thank you so very much, and best of luck.
Howard, always good talking to you. I'm glad I had a chance to see you. It's been a couple of years, Howard. You look great.
We'll have more after these messages. Thanks to our guest, Gary Green. This is our final show. We want to thank our excellent producer, Dave West, for all his great work. Goodbye, everybody.